If the katana was such a perfect weapon, why did samurai keep losing wars against enemies with inferior swords? The katana has been mythologized as the ultimate blade. Hollywood, anime, and popular media have constructed a narrative around it as a perfectly balanced instrument of death, forged through ancient rituals and wielded by an elite warrior class. The legend suggests an unkillable edge, a weapon without equal. Yet historical records tell a different story. In actual combat, katanas possessed a fundamental flaw that made them ineffective in specific, but extremely common, battlefield scenarios. This weakness forced entire armies to abandon their most iconic weapon and fundamentally reshaped how Japanese warfare evolved for centuries. Most remarkably, the samurai understood this limitation. They never attempted to hide it. And they adapted, and that adaptation reveals everything about what was actually wrong with the weapon itself. To understand this, we need to begin with a basic principle. The katana was, in metallurgical terms, among the finest blades ever created. Japanese swordsmiths developed techniques that were revolutionary for their time. The process of folding steel, tempering it at precise temperatures, and achieving a balance between hardness and flexibility were solutions to genuine engineering problems. The folding process removed impurities. The tempering created a blade that would neither shatter on impact nor dull rapidly. This manufacturing philosophy developed over centuries through generations of refinement. Yet there exists a critical distinction between exceptional performance in a specific context and superiority in all contexts. And that gap is where the myth breaks down. The katana's legend stems from centuries of samurai culture, craftsmanship, and a fighting philosophy centered on individual honor. The blade became inseparable from samurai identity. However, a weapon optimized for one environment does not automatically function well in all environments. The katana evolved in Japan within a specific context. An island nation, island warfare, opponents wearing lighter armor composed primarily of leather, silk padding, and woven fabric. Every aspect of the weapon's design, the blade curve, the length, the weight distribution, was engineered for slashing through soft materials at close range. In medieval Japan, this was not a weakness. It was precise specialization. Specialization remains powerful only until the context changes. A fact often overlooked is that samurai used an enormous variety of weapons throughout their history. Spears ranging from 12 to 18 feet. Axes specifically designed for breaking armor. Bows with substantial draw weight and accuracy. Clubs, chains, and eventually firearms. Samurai commanders were weapons generalists. They understood that different situations required different tools. This itself raises a significant question. If the katana was genuinely superior as a universal weapon, why would elite warriors spend decades mastering multiple options? Why carry different weapons if one was objectively the best? The answer requires examining three interconnected problems: geometry, physics, and armor evolution. And these factors combined created a blade that was brilliant at specific tasks, but became nearly useless when conditions shifted. Not because samurai warriors lost their skill or craftsmanship declined, but because a specialized tool was being asked to perform functions for which it was designed to fail. The katana's design prioritizes cutting through soft targets. A katana blade features a pronounced curve running nearly its entire length. Most blades are relatively straight. The katana differs. It curves like a crescent moon. This curve is highly functional. It creates a cutting edge that engages the target at the beginning of the swing. The geometry allows the cutting edge to follow the contours of soft materials, skin, muscle, fabric, producing deeper, more effective cuts than a straight blade. It is optimized for slashing. That same curve creates a critical vulnerability against armor. During the Siege of Busan in Korea in 1592, Japanese forces faced Ming Dynasty reinforcements equipped with full plate armor. Consider a samurai warrior facing a Ming soldier wearing hardened steel chest plates, pauldrons protecting the shoulders, articulated forearm guards, and knee protection. The samurai swings his katana with full force at the armor's curved breastplate. The blade glances off. The force dissipates. The angle of impact combined with the curve of both blade and armor result in ineffectual contact. A weapon with different geometry would behave differently. A spear with a straight, perpendicular point, a straight-bladed sword designed for thrusting, even an axe with a flat, perpendicular striking surface. All would concentrate impact force at a single point. That concentrated force might penetrate or dent the armor. The katana's curve, however, spreads force across a wider contact area. Against rigid plate armor, that curve becomes a liability rather than an asset. During the Imjin War of 1592–98, when Japanese samurai first encountered Korean and Chinese forces equipped with full plate armor, something occurred that historical records document explicitly. Combat effectiveness dropped dramatically. Japanese commanders noted that their katanas struggled to penetrate heavier armor. Korean and Chinese records confirm the observation from their perspective. Despite samurai reputation and skill, their swords did not deliver the expected advantage. The curved blade was designed for a different purpose entirely. It evolved in Japan, fighting opponents wearing leather and silk padding. In that environment, the curve was optimal. Slashing through fabric layers produced devastating results. The sharp edge bit through, the curve followed body contours. In Korea and China, the warriors wore hard shell armor made of steel plates articulated together. Suddenly, the geometry that had been brilliant became the geometry that was weak. The physics that gave the katana its advantage in one context actively worked against it in another. The geometry problem becomes more severe when considering a separate issue: reach advantage. A fundamental principle of combat that military strategists understood long before samurai developed their sword culture is that distance confers advantage. The fighter striking from greater distance than an opponent can return has reached dominance. The average katana blade measures approximately 28 inches. With the handle, the total extends to roughly 40 inches, about 3 1/3 feet from the fighter's hand to the tip. Against another swordsman, this is meaningful. Then on a historical battlefield, context changes this calculation entirely. Warfare was not typically one-on-one combat in open space. It was formation fighting. Soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder with allied troops pressed tightly. The enemy line was equally packed. Movement was restricted. In this scenario, a longer weapon holds an absolutely decisive advantage. A spear or pike with 12, 15, or 18 feet of reach allows striking enemies before they can reach a katana-wielding soldier. The longer weapon controls engagement distance. It determines when and where contact occurs. The entire dynamic is controlled by reach. A katana fighter in a packed formation operates in an entirely different combat environment where the weapon's design becomes nearly irrelevant. During the Korean campaigns, samurai encountered forces employing spears and pikes extensively, operating under Chinese tactical doctrine. The reality that emerged from these battles was simple. If one fighter holds a 15-foot pike with a hardened steel point, while an opponent holds a 3-foot sword, superior skill becomes less critical. The pike wielder merely maintains the distance already established. The pike point remains forward. The engagement distance is already won geometrically. This disparity was so significant that Japanese commanders made a fundamental strategic decision. By the end of the Imjin War, samurai armies had restructured their tactical doctrine. They relied far less on individual swordplay and increasingly on pike formations, coordinated tactics, and ranged weapons including bows and eventually firearms. And this was not a story of katana victory. This was a story of the katana's limitations, forcing a complete strategic reorganization. By the 1500s, samurai armor had evolved into something sophisticated. Articulated steel construction, steel helmets, hardened chest plates. The engineering was impressive. The armor was effective. It created a problem the katana was fundamentally unequipped to solve. The katana was never designed to defeat rigid armor. It was designed to cut soft materials. When armor became increasingly hardened and layered, the katana's core design principles became actively disadvantageous. Consider the physics. When a curved blade contacts a flat, hard surface at an angle, and angles are inherent in combat, two things occur simultaneously. First, impact force dissipates across the curve instead of concentrating at a single point. Push with a finger against a curved surface versus a sharp point. Curved surfaces distribute pressure across a wider area. Concentrated points concentrate pressure into a small area. Armor requires that concentration. It requires either penetration or a dent. The curve and angle cause the blade to glance off the armor rather than bite in. The energy is expended, the attack committed, but nothing is accomplished. Metallurgical perfection does not matter when geometry actively works against penetration. A samurai warrior facing an opponent wearing heavy plate armor found that even the sharpest katana struggled significantly against hard plate. The warrior faced three options. First, find a gap in the armor, the neck, the armpits, the articulations between plates. This requires precision and luck. In the chaos of combat with multiple opponents, this is unreliable. Second, use a different weapon entirely. Historical accounts of samurai in armor describe them using spears with armor-penetrating points, clubs and maces designed for blunt force trauma that armor could not prevent, axes with concentrated striking surfaces, and even specialized armor-piercing hammers. Third, attempt a concentrated thrust at a weak point rather than relying on slashing motions. This abandons the katana's designed strengths to compensate for its weaknesses. None of these represent the powerful slashing motions the katana is designed for. When samurai faced serious armor in actual battles, they adapted their tactics and changed their weapons. Historical records document this explicitly. The samurai commanders noted which weapons proved effective against armor and which did not. They made pragmatic decisions about how to arm their forces. When heavy armor became standard on the battlefield, the katana transitioned from primary weapon to secondary weapon. It became a sidearm, used for situations outside formal battle, personal defense, or close-quarters circumstances. On the main battlefield against armored opponents, the katana had become irrelevant. The samurai understood this limitation. They made conscious, documented decisions about when the katana was useful and when it simply was not. If the katana was so limited, why did samurai continue using it for centuries? Why not abandon it entirely for spears and pikes? Warfare is not exclusively an exercise in combat effectiveness, and multiple factors shape which weapons survive. Military effectiveness, certainly, but also culture, tradition, economics, training systems, and pure practicality. The katana became the defining symbol of the samurai class. Beyond functionality, it represented identity itself. It was the symbol of honor, the marker of a warrior, the tool through which a samurai expressed his personal code and individual excellence. Even if a spear was more effective in formation warfare, the katana was irreplaceable as a cultural artifact and social marker. Samurai also existed within a complex tactical environment beyond formation battle. They were mobile warriors operating in diverse contexts. While a spear is devastating in tight formation, different scenarios require different approaches. What happens when formation breaks? Rough terrain? Is close-quarters combat in a castle or fortified position? A samurai traveling alone encountering bandits? In these contexts, the katana's compact size provided practical advantages that a 15-foot pike could never achieve. A katana is easily carried. It deploys quickly. It functions in confined spaces. A spear requires open space, formation, and coordination. A katana works solo. Rather than abandoning the katana, samurai integrated it into a broader arsenal. They carried spears for formation warfare, bows for ranged combat, and eventually firearms. They retained the katana for everything else: personal defense, travel, close-quarters situations, and its role in warrior identity. This was a rational decision. It was recognizing that different tools serve different purposes. One tool does not serve every function effectively, and modern military practice illustrates the same principle. A soldier carries a rifle as primary weapon for large-scale combat. That same soldier carries a pistol as secondary weapon, despite the pistol being less effective than the rifle in most scenarios. Why? Because the pistol serves specific roles the rifle cannot. It deploys faster in close quarters. It functions when the rifle is inaccessible. It provides backup. Each tool has a purpose. The samurai understood this principle centuries before modern militaries formalized it. The katana was not abandoned because it was not universally superior. It was retained because samurai commanders understood that it filled specific roles the spear could not, even though the spear was superior in formation warfare. Why does the katana mythology persist so powerfully? Despite historical evidence, and despite documented limitations, despite samurai's own pragmatic decisions, many continue to believe in the katana as the perfect, unkillable blade. The reality of weapons across different contexts is rarely visible to general audiences. Samurai are seen through narratives of honor, individual combat, and cinematic storytelling. Those narratives are compelling and dramatic. But in the real world, weapons are tools evaluated on practical effectiveness within their specific contexts. A sword designed for light armor loses meaning when context shifts to heavy armor. A short weapon designed for solo combat loses meaning when context shifts to formation warfare. The historical truth is that the katana was brilliant at what it was engineered to do. It was exquisitely optimized for slashing through light armor. The metallurgical techniques were extraordinary, the craftsmanship exceptional. But brilliant specialization carries a cost. That cost is limitation in everything else. This is not criticism. This is simply how specialized tools function in reality. Optimization for every scenario simultaneously is impossible. Trade-offs must be made. The samurai understood this. They made conscious decisions about what they were optimizing for. When context changed, they adapted. When samurai lost wars against enemies with swords considered inferior, it was not because the samurai were weak warriors. It was not because their fighting spirit was insufficient. It was because they were using a specialized tool in an environment where that specialization had become a liability. The katana is an incredible weapon, and it is a masterpiece of metallurgical engineering. It is simply not the unkillable, perfect blade that popular culture has constructed. It was designed for a specific context. When that context changed, when warriors started wearing harder armor, when battles shifted to formation combat, when the strategic environment evolved, the katana's limitations became apparent. The samurai adapted. They made pragmatic decisions based on what actually worked. The katana mythology is compelling, yet the reality is more instructive. A weapon is only as effective as its match to the conditions it must meet.